So you always start with questions about who you're speaking to, right? So and any communicator, like in the creative industry, say, it always starts with understanding your target audience. You then work back from that and you say, well, there's some things which will be very interesting and engaging for this group, and there'll be other things they frankly don't care about. And there's going to be some other things that they really dislike. So part of the thing with climate change is that some of the messaging we use alienates people. You know, like if you're a mainstream conservative, you find the idea of blocking roads, and kind of like growing your hair long and blocking roads and bashing your hippie bongo drums and stuff, kind of revolting, laughable, if not disgusting. And so you're always trying to find a way of speaking to people. So and that's whether you're doing it on a big scale, like I've just had this whole call of Channel 4 about how to address their audience, which, as they say, is probably mostly sort of like fairly middle-aged Daily Mail readers, right? To how you speak to people in your own family. How do we speak to Dylan about climate change? I don't know. He's very hard to speak to, right? But Dylan is excited by, he's excited by technology, and he's excited by, opportunity. He quite likes the idea of making money. There might be things in that mix. Talking to him about, his responsibility to global social justice probably isn't going to work very well with Dylan. He's not motivated by that. In fact, he starts arguing back. He's actively motivated in the opposite direction. If you try and get all woke with him. I think that's, yeah. And similarly, if you're preparing a video for, if you're preparing a video for creatives, right? They're your target audience. Yeah? I mean, the people you want to speak to are them. You need to be asking, what are their values? What excites them? What concerns them? And I would suspect they're like anybody, that they're motivated by concerns about the issue. I expect probably they'd like the idea of a challenge. They like the idea of doing something which is socially good, because they tend to feel quite guilty about the fact that they make their money out of selling Coca-Cola. Well, it's huge. And I think, one of the things that's one of the things to tell the creatives is to say, look, this is probably the most complex issue that we've ever faced as humanity. So there is no single magic bullet. There's no, I've just come out of this whole call with Channel 4, and they're saying, okay, so what do we tell people to do? And I go, well, it's not that straightforward. There's like 50 things that people need to do. We can't draw out any single one, but if you give people 50 things to do, they kind of go mad. And but I think it's fair to say this is not easy. Generally speaking, all communication starts by validating the audience. So it has to start by saying, whoever you're speaking to, saying, you're really important, you're really worthwhile, your contribution to society is really valuable. And that's why we need you to be a part of this. So that's what I would say to anybody, whether they're environmental activists, or whether they're doctors, or whether they're oil industry workers, or whatever. You start by saying what you do is really important, and you've got a really important part to play in the solutions, and we need you. It has to be authentic, and so you don't literally do that. You wouldn't necessarily use the words I use, but that is the feeling. I have a video up on the internet called How to Talk to a Climate Denier, which I did some years ago. But basically, what I would say hasn't changed since. That you have to avoid telling other people what they should do. So you don't want to be using the third person. You don't want to say, this is what you should do. And it's probably not good to say, this is what we should do. It's much better to have something saying, this is what I am doing, and I invite you to be part of it. So the best thing for any audience is to get somebody from that audience, and then they say, I'm like you. I'm really proud of who we are. Right? We're really good. And because it's coming from somebody who is one of them, that's good. And it's like, and now we have this problem that really needs our help. Because we've got something very valuable to offer to this. And that's what I'm doing. And this is what I'm doing. And I invite you to be a part of it. And this formula you could apply to anything. I've applied it to loads of different projects. But it's also got to, it's not even very advanced psychology. People want to feel good about who they are. And they want to therefore feel that the things that they're doing are the kind of things that are good in terms of who they are. And for different people, it's going to be different. I hate using animals, because I think that's a way of distancing ourselves from it. We've got to be very careful of these things that say climate change. I write about this in the book, right? We've got to be very careful of these things that say climate change, it's a problem far away that affects other people or other animals. Yeah. Because that's all a way that we distance ourselves, and therefore by extension we say climate change doesn't affect me here and now. Which is changing now. People are now realising, but it's taken them 30 years to get here, and that's 30 wasted years. Yeah. Whilst we're talking about polar bears and and how bad this is going to be in Africa. Well, make things come closer to home. I sat in a pub for a few hours with a bunch of Welsh farmers, and I just asked them questions, and I just listened. But I recorded it, and then I went back into the recording and copied the whole recording out, so that I could that's basically what you do in a focus group, right? So I'd say one of the key things you need to say to anybody who wants to work on this is that they have to listen. They have to know who they're talking to, and then they have to go out and they have to listen to those people. And they have to just ask them a few gentle questions, like, what are your concerns? How do you feel about this? But the question I always ask people is what makes them proud about who they are. Get them talking from a position of positivity. So if we were doing a project in Llanidloes, for example, I would start by asking people what's really nice about living in Llanidloes. What is it that makes Lanny something special? Because that then is giving you the clues for what's going to make good communication. But I'm doing a lot of talking now, but if I was doing a piece of research, I talk very little. I just sit and I listen and I encourage people. Well, you can be negative about climate change. You can say climate change is a major threat, but you have to be positive about our capacity to deal with it. So, if you say climate change is a huge threat and it's going to destroy us, well, that's fine, but you're not going to get many takers for that. If you're going to say climate change is a huge threat and this is going to be really hard, but because of the kind of people we are, we can deal with it, we're going to have to make some big changes. And this is not going to be easy, but we'll get through this, then actually you've got a lot more takers.
Facts and figures kind of lose meaning.
Yeah, they don't work. Nobody pays any attention to them. It works if you are the kind of person who is motivated by those messages. But you have already predefined your audience by your message, which is the wrong way round. You should not let the message determine the audience. You should let the audience determine the message. That is the critical thing, right? So if you are speaking to an audience which is motivated by facts and figures, like a scientific audience, then you don't want to go and tell them some nice story. You want to give them lots of graphs and facts and figures. That's who they are, right? If you were speaking to if you're speaking though to a mainstream audience, you want to speak to them in terms of things which concern and engage them. So audience first, and then, you know, and generally speaking, the big mistake that people make is they think that what works for them works for other people. So, for example, people who are environmentalists get very motivated by the scary stuff. In fact, someone once called it climate porn. The idea that you like present something really, really hardcore, and they become kind of addicted to it, so that it has to be even worse to get them motivated. They become what's the word? Deadened in some way. But the biggest mistake you can make as a communicator is by projecting your own values onto the audience. And you're so right about authenticity, guys. So that has to be really in there. That's people don't trust at the moment. People don't trust government, right? They don't trust the media unless it's their media. And a lot of people don't really trust scientists. So the only thing they trust is people who are like them. So you've got to find a way. So really, a lot of communication is about building it around the communicator. So who's the communicator, and how do we work with that communicator to do it well? I think also what you can say, Guy, is you can say not just being interested in other people, but loving people. I mean, love sometimes feels like the wrong word, so it's more of a faith word, right? But I think you've got to love people. I think you've got to genuinely like and believe that people are good, and that people are trying to do the best they can, and that even people who are nasty, they've got some problems working out for them.
Yeah.
Because a lot of environmentalists actually hate people, or they're very judgmentally critical of people. But they have to approach it with a position of open-mindedness in the first place. They're not interested in having those conversations. I mean, I have them all the time. I mean, you know, I regularly have chats with people, you know, on buses and trains and people I meet, and I approach them with a kind of sense of open-mindedness. And I chat with people who are, I often speak with people who are on, you know, far left and far right, and I'm just genuinely interested in them. And they're never bad people. They're just trying to make sense of the world in their own terms. Talking of creatives, I think you need to explain climate change as a uniquely difficult problem, that it's really challenging, that it's really hard, that it's really unusual, that people deal with it on their own terms, but no one is perfect, that a lot of people are actually in various ways quite scared by it, so they try to avoid it. That the natural tendency is not to try and solve the problem, but to try and ignore the problem. And so we have to find a way of bringing people to the problem, not by saying, actually, it's an even bigger problem than you thought it was and it's really bad, but maybe more to say, hey, let's look at this together, and this is hard and this is challenging, but we can deal with it. And we're not going to do ourselves any favours by ignoring it. But it has to be that sense of togetherness. So the overall feeling should be one of, you know, we all have something to contribute. Let's have a conversation and let's find solutions together. And we can all learn from each other. And I think something which is a very important spirit, which I have in the book, but I say whenever I talk about this, is that diversity, real diversity, involves respecting people, wanting to have a range of views, but also recognizing everybody has something to contribute. And diversity is, yes, it's about black and white folks, and it's about gender, and it's about all of these things, and it's about sexual orientation, but it's also about politics too, and it's also about class and education. very highly educated people can learn plenty from somebody who left school at 16. As that person who left school at 16, I've had, I had a great conversation on the train once with a woman, and she'd just come back from visiting her dad in prison. And she was like really, really, like a problem family. Like they were all in and out of prison, and they were all chaotic, kind of disastrous, messed up family. And I really liked her. I mean, we got on well. She was about my age, I'd say, probably. She was smart. She was clearly somebody who hadn't had the right opportunities in life, but was smart. And actually, when it came to climate change, although she had very little education, she just completely and immediately intuitively got it. She had no problems getting and understanding it. She was very, very sharp on it. Yeah, and I've talked to people who are very, who are like highly educated, sometimes lecturing in universities, and they're complete fucking idiots. They're talking bollocks, Smart doesn't mean you're right, and smart people can do really stupid things in a very smart way. Anyway, so it's about that education. It's about class as well. I think what you should say in your film, or say generally, is that a lot of people feel alienated by the whole climate discussion because they don't identify with the people who hold it. So if you're somebody who is working class, less well educated, maybe a person of colour, you look at these white middle class university students protesting on climate change, and you feel nothing in common with them. And that's a big problem.